Mother-in-law scolds me for being a freeloader. She has no idea that I secretly earn $100,000 a month. The scraping sound of Eleanor's chair against the linoleum floor was like a needle on a chalkboard. It was Sunday dinner again, and the tension in her small, overly decorated dining room was thick enough to cut with the gravy spoon. I sat there across from my wife Chloe at the heavy oak table, trying to make myself small, trying to just get through the meal without a direct confrontation. It rarely worked, so Liam Eleanor started her voice sweet as artificial sweetener, which meant she was about to say something passive-aggressive and nasty. She folded her hands neatly on the table, her eyes sharp and scrutinizing fixed on me. Another day, another busy time on your computer? I took a slow bite of mashed potatoes. Yes, Eleanor, I was working. She chuckled a dry, humorless sound. Working? Right. Seems like a lot of working involves staying in your pajamas until noon and staring at screens. Must be nice. Some of us have actual jobs, where you have to leave the house and interact with people and, earn money. There it was, the standard line, the one she'd been hammering at me with in increasingly blunt ways for the past 6 months. Freeloader. That was the word she loved to use, though often not directly to my face. More like, it's hard carrying all the weight around here when some people aren't contributing, or it must be lovely to have so much free time while others are working their fingers to the bone, directed pointedly in my direction while talking to Chloe or her husband Walter. My name is Liam. I'm 38 years old. 6 months ago, my wife Chloe and I moved in with her parents, Eleanor and Walter. It was supposed to be temporary. Walter had a health scare. Nothing life-threatening, thankfully, but serious enough that he needed help around the house for a while. And Eleanor was struggling to manage everything on her own, especially the finances, which Walter usually handled. Our lease was up on our condo in the city anyway. Chloe, a wonderful but sometimes overly anxious person, insisted we move in to help. It made sense at the time. Downsize temporarily, help out family, save some money while we looked for a new place. What Eleanor didn't know, what most people didn't know, was the reality of my work. I transitioned a few years ago from a high-stress executive role in financial services to something much more independent. I was a high-frequency online trader and also did remote, highly specialized financial consulting for a few major international clients. My work required intense focus, long hours in front of multiple screens, deep analysis, and split-second decisions. It didn't look like a traditional job. To an outsider, especially someone like Eleanor who thought work meant punching a clock or dealing with customers, it probably looked like I was playing video games or messing around online. And the income. It wasn't steady like a salary. Some months were lower, some were higher. But averaged out over the past couple of years, it was consistently well over $100,000 a month. $100,000. Every 30 days roughly, that kind of money flowed into my accounts, managed quietly, invested strategically. Enough money to buy Eleanor's house outright cash. Enough to fund Chloe's sister's entire college education 3 times over. Enough to let Chloe and I live very, very comfortably anywhere we wanted. But Eleanor saw me in my sweatpants and t-shirts glued to my monitors in the small spare bedroom I used as an office, not leaving the house 5 days a week at 8 a.m. with a briefcase. She saw me occasionally take out the trash or do a load of laundry when Chloe asked, but not tackle the major yard work Walter used to do. She saw me eat food she bought, even though Chloe insisted on contributing generously to groceries, often covering my share and hers, which Eleanor seemed to ignore. She saw me using her electricity and internet, and she decided I was a freeloader, a lazy bum, a burden on her and Walter, who had worked hard all their lives. Chloe knew the truth. Not the exact 6-figure monthly number maybe, but she knew my income was substantial, far exceeding hers. She worked part-time as a graphic designer. It was her idea to keep the true extent of my income quiet when we moved in. She was worried, she said, that if her parents or her younger brother Ben knew how well I was really doing, they would constantly ask for money for loans for help with every little thing. Chloe loved her family, but she knew their tendency to rely on others and their often precarious financial situation. Keeping my income quiet was supposed to be a shield away to avoid drama and endless requests. But the shield was turning on me. Eleanor's resentment festered. She started making pointed comments to Walter when I was within earshot, loud sighs about expenses, dramatic declarations about needing to cut back. Walter, a quiet man, seemed uncomfortable but didn't challenge her. Chloe tried bless her heart. Mom Liam works very hard. It's a different kind of job, she'd say. Her voice strained. Oh, working? Eleanor would scoff, waving a hand dismissively. Anyone can stare at a screen, dear. That's not providing for a family. That's not contributing to the household you live in for free. The last part always got to me. Live in for free. We were contributing. Chloe was transferring money to their account every month, an amount that was more than fair for our share of utilities and groceries, maybe even a little extra towards the mortgage or property taxes. But Eleanor either didn't notice or chose to ignore it, or perhaps the amount, while reasonable, didn't live up to her undefined expectation of what a contributing adult male living in her house should provide. I tolerated it because Chloe asked me to keep the peace. I tolerated it because Walter was recovering, and I didn't want to add stress. I tolerated it because deep down, I knew my life was infinitely more secure and successful than the one she seemed to value, and her opinion was irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. But it wore on me. The constant disrespect. The snide comments, the way she looked at me, like I was some kind of parasite. My quiet nature, my lack of outward displays of wealth, no fancy car, simple clothes, and my unconventional work made me an easy target for her judgment. One afternoon, about a month ago, I had a time-sensitive trade that required intense focus. The market was volatile. Millions of dollars were on the line, not just mine, but clients. Eleanor chose that exact moment to start vacuuming the hallway right outside my office door, loudly bumping into the doorframe repeatedly. I tried to ignore it, but the noise was impossible. I finally opened the door. Eleanor, could you please? Maybe vacuum later. I'm on a call. It's very important, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. She shut off the vacuum with a flourish, giving me a look of pure disdain. Oh, important call, is it? From who, your video game buddies? This hallway needs cleaning, Liam. Some of us actually do things around here to maintain the house you're living in for free. She turned the vacuum back on, deliberately louder this time. I had to scramble mute my microphone, relocate my setup to a different room just to finish the trade, without losing a significant amount of money. It was infuriating. It wasn't just annoying. It felt like deliberate sabotage fueled by her resentment. That's when something shifted. My tolerance ran out. Protecting the secret to avoid drama wasn't working. The secret was the source of the drama. Enduring her abuse wasn't keeping the peace. It was enabling her to escalate. I realized I couldn't live like this. I wasn't just protecting my financial privacy. I was sacrificing my dignity, my peace of mind, and putting a strain on my marriage because Chloe couldn't get her mother to see reason. I decided I wouldn't reveal my income just to stop the accusations. I would wait. I would gather evidence of her behavior. I would wait for the perfect moment to reveal the truth, not just as a defense, but as a decisive mic-dropping moment that would completely flip the script and expose her cruelty and assumptions for what they were. My silence would become my weapon. I started discreetly voice recording some of her tirades, legal in our state if you are part of the conversation or in common areas with no expectation of privacy. I saved her passive-aggressive emails. I documented the dates and times of disruptive behavior. Over the next few weeks, my resolve hardened. I started to subtly gather more information about Eleanor and Walter's financial situation. Using some of the same databases and public records tools I used for my consulting work, I looked for liens, property records, anything that might shed light on why Eleanor was so fixated on money and contribution. What I found was eye-opening, and it painted a much clearer picture of Eleanor's desperation. The house, the one she constantly reminded me I was freeloading in, had a significant second mortgage taken out about 2 years ago. The amount was large enough to be concerning. And digging deeper, I found the money from that second mortgage hadn't gone into home improvements. A large chunk of it had been transferred to an account belonging to Ben Chloe's younger brother. Ben, Ben was perpetually between opportunities. He dabbled in various get-rich-quick schemes that always seemed to fail. He was charming but unreliable. I knew he occasionally borrowed money from his parents, but I didn't know they had mortgaged their house, potentially putting it at risk, to bail him out of something substantial. This explained Eleanor's constant stress about money, her cutting back on groceries, which made Chloe's contribution even more vital and my supposed lack of contribution even more offensive to her and her desperate need for financial relief. She wasn't just being mean. She was projecting her own financial anxiety and resentment, possibly hoping that if I had a real job, I would somehow magically solve their problems, or at least stop being in her eyes a drain. My perceived freeloading wasn't just an annoyance. It was an obstacle to her desperate need for every penny to go towards their own hidden crisis. This added a new layer to the betrayal. It wasn't just her unfair judgment. It was a deliberate blindness fueled by her own secrets and financial recklessness, potentially putting her husband's security at risk for Ben's failures. I didn't confront her about this yet. I just added it to my mental file, another piece of ammunition for the eventual showdown. Then came the real shocker. During a seemingly casual conversation with Walter one afternoon while Eleanor was out, he sighed heavily. "This old house," he said, looking around, "needs more work than we can afford, Liam. The foundation is starting to show some cracks in the roof. Well, I don't know how much longer it will hold up before we have a major leak. Eleanor worries constantly. Cracks in the foundation. A failing roof. These weren't small repairs. These were major 5-figure problems, maybe even 6 figures depending on the extent. Combined with the second mortgage tied to Ben's bailout, the house wasn't just a place I was freeloading in. It was a financial liability that Eleanor was struggling desperately to maintain, possibly on the brink of becoming unsalvageable or being lost. Eleanor's fixation on me being a freeloader on every penny of expense I represented suddenly made more desperate sense. She wasn't just being petty. She was terrified of losing the house because of their debt and its deteriorating condition. And in her twisted logic, every dollar I supposedly wasn't contributing was a dollar pushing them closer to the edge. But here's the twist within the twist. While she was scolding me for being home all day, while she was complaining about the cost of my existence, I wasn't just sitting on my hands. Knowing that we were living here and seeing small signs of disrepair peeling paint a leaky faucet, I fixed myself. I had already quietly anonymously hired a structural engineer to assess the foundation and a roofing company to give an estimate. I received their reports weeks ago. The news wasn't good. The foundation needed significant work, and the roof was worse than Walter thought. The cost estimates were indeed substantial. And while Eleanor was accusing me of using her electricity, I had already, through a separate channel, without telling them, set up an account to discreetly pay their major utility bills directly from one of my business accounts, making sure they were always paid on time, preventing any potential shutoffs or financial penalties that might add to their burden. I hadn't told them because I was still respecting Chloe's initial desire for privacy, and partly because I wanted to see how far Eleanor would take her accusations despite this quiet contribution. She took it very far. This put me in an incredibly powerful position. I had the financial means to fix the house entirely, to pay off their mortgages, to erase their debts. I had the knowledge of their true hidden vulnerability. And they were treating me like a bum who couldn't rub 2 nickels together. The weight of the secret couple with the constant barrage of insults was heavy. Every time Eleanor sneered, every time she made a comment about my supposed laziness, I felt a complex mix of pain, anger, and a grim, almost overwhelming sense of dramatic irony. They saw a slacker. I saw a person silently holding their financial future in my hands. They saw a burden. I saw the one person who could actually save them from the consequences of their own poor choices and secrets. The pain came from being so fundamentally misunderstood and disrespected by my wife's family, people who were supposed to welcome me, especially when I had stepped in to help them. It was the sting of the freeloader label when I was capable of earning more in a day than they made in months. It was the frustration of Chloe being caught in the middle, begging me to just tell them, while part of me wanted to wait for the moment of maximum impact. The anger was directed at Eleanor's cruelty, her arrogance, her self-pity that blinded her to reality, and her hypocrisy given her own financial secrets and reckless decisions regarding Ben. But the grim satisfaction came from the power I held. They thought they had leverage over me because I was living in their house. They thought they could dictate terms and demand things because they perceived me as weak and dependent. They had no idea that their entire world, their home, their financial stability or lack thereof, was something I could influence with a few keystrokes. My quiet enduring wasn't weakness, it was patience. Patience for the right moment to unleash the truth. They saw me as a burden they needed to get rid of or force into contribution. I saw them as a train wreck. I could either divert or let crash a train wreck partially caused by the person they favored. They didn't want me in their lives as an equal as a success they didn't understand. They wanted me to fit their narrow critical box or disappear. Fine. I would step out of their box, but I wouldn't disappear. I would command their attention. My resolve solidified. I would not continue to be their punching bag. I would not let them define me. I would wait for Eleanor's next most audacious accusation, and then I would reveal everything. Not with anger, but with the quiet, devastating power of truth and financial reality. The tension continued to build. Eleanor's comments escalated from passive-aggressive sighs to direct demands. She started leaving classifieds for real jobs on my desk. She'd ask Chloe pointedly, "Has Liam contributed anything to the grocery fund this week?" Even though she knew Chloe handled it. She even suggested during a particularly tense dinner with Ben present, who studiously avoided my eyes, that maybe I should get a little loan from somewhere to help with some unexpected expenses they had, since I seem to have so much free time to apply for things. Ben, looking uncomfortable, mumbled something about needing to get going. He still hadn't acknowledged to me or Chloe, as far as I knew, his involvement in the second mortgage that was likely stressing Eleanor to this degree. His presence just underscored the network of secrets and enablers I was living amongst. Chloe was at her breaking point. She'd come to me after her mother's tirades, sometimes in tears. "Liam, please just tell them. Tell them how well you're doing. Just show them your bank account. I can't stand this anymore. She's making both of us miserable." I held her close. "Not yet, Chloe. Trust me. It won't be enough just to tell her. She'll find a way to dismiss it or resent it. She needs to learn." My plan was becoming clearer. The moment was getting closer. I was waiting for her to make a move that would be undeniable even to her. That move came the next week. I received a registered letter addressed to me. It was from a lawyer's office. It was a formal demand letter drafted on behalf of Robert and Mary Turner. It stated that since I had been residing in their property for 6 months, without contributing financially to the household expenses they were formally requesting, I began paying rent effective immediately at a rate significantly above market value for the area. It also listed a lump sum back payment for the past 6 months. The letter was cold official and threatening legal action if I didn't comply within 30 days. Eleanor didn't just want to complain anymore. She wanted to formalize the freeloader narrative, potentially forcing me to either pay an exorbitant amount which I could afford, but it was the principal, or give her legal grounds to kick me out. This was it. This was the move that couldn't be ignored, explained away, or endured silently any longer. She had weaponized her false narrative. I showed the letter to Chloe. She read it, her face paling, then crumpled it in her hand, tears streaming down her face. "I can't believe she did this," she whispered, heartbroken. "She actually got a lawyer. To send you this, I can believe it," I said, my voice calm. "This is what she wanted, to make it official, to prove I'm a burden." But there was no panic in me. Only a quiet, steel-hard resolve. They wanted a formal financial negotiation. They wanted to bring in lawyers and demands. Fine. We would have a financial discussion. But it wouldn't be the one they expected. I didn't respond to the lawyer's letter. Instead, I spoke to Chloe. "Chloe," I said gently, Remember why you wanted me to keep my income quiet, to avoid drama, to avoid them asking for money. She nodded, sobbing. Well, I continued. It didn't work. The secret didn't prevent the drama. It enabled her to create a different kind of drama, a drama based on lies and disrespect. It's time for the secret to end, not just for me, but for you. So you don't have to be in the middle anymore. She looked at me scared, but also hopeful. You're going to tell them, I'm going to tell them, I confirmed. But not just tell them. I'm going to show them. Everything at Sunday dinner. I asked Chloe to make sure her brother Ben was also invited to dinner this Sunday. I had a feeling he needed to be there for this. Sunday dinner arrived. The air was even thicker than usual. Eleanor was radiating smug confidence. She probably thought the lawyer's letter had put me in my place, that I was scrambling to find a job or get a loan to meet her demands. Walter seemed even more withdrawn than usual, sensing the tension. Chloe was pale and quiet, picking at her food, knowing what was coming, but not knowing how it would unfold. Ben was there looking fidgety and avoiding eye contact with everyone. We ate in almost complete silence for the first 20 minutes. Then Eleanor set down her fork with a decisive clink. She looked directly at me, a hard, expectant look in her eyes. "Liam," she began, her voice losing its artificial sweetness, becoming cold and direct. "We need to discuss the letter you received this week. Walter and I have been very patient, but 6 months is long enough. It's time for you to start contributing fairly to this household. As the letter stated, we expect the back payment within 30 days and then monthly rent going forward." She leaned back, a look of triumph on her face. This was her ultimatum, her moment to finally force my hand to dismantle my supposed freeloading lifestyle. I met her gaze. I didn't fidget. I didn't look away. I took a deep breath and set down my own fork. "Yes, Eleanor," I said calmly. My voice was steady, perhaps a little quieter than usual, which somehow made the words more impactful. "We do need to discuss that letter. And we need to discuss contributing to the household." I paused, letting the silence stretch, building the tension. Eleanor looked slightly taken aback by my lack of defensiveness, but quickly recovered her confident smirk. "Good," she said. "So you understand. We can discuss payment arrangements. Although, frankly, Walter and I believe that given the circumstances and your lack of traditional employment, a lump sum is preferable for the back amount." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said, a small cold smile touching my lips. "I understand that you believe I have no money, that I am a burden, that I am freeloading in your home." I reached down to the briefcase I had placed beside my chair, something I never brought to Sunday dinner. I opened it slowly and took out a few documents. "You believe I don't contribute," I said, holding up a printed bank statement. "You believe I don't earn money." I slid the statement across the table. It was a summary page from one of my primary business accounts. My name, the company, name a subtle professional one, and the current balance, followed by a list of recent large incoming transfers, labeled consulting fee or investment return. "This is my account," I said, my voice still calm. "This statement is from the end of last month." Eleanor looked at the paper. Her eyes widened. Walter leaned in, curious. Chloe watched, her hands clasped tightly. Ben shifted in his seat. The balance was in the high 7 figures. The incoming transfers were substantial, frequent. As you can see, I continued letting her process the numbers. "My work, it does pay. The amount varies month to month. But over the past year, my average monthly income has been, let's just say, well over $100,000. Silence. Stunned, absolute silence. Eleanor's face went from confident smirk to utter shock, then disbelief. Walter stared at the paper, then at me. Chloe let out a small, shaky breath. Ben looked like he might bolt. $100,000 a month, Eleanor whispered, the color draining from her face. "On average, yes," I confirmed, "sometimes more. Enough certainly to pay market rent, or to buy this house outright with cash and still have plenty left over." This was the initial flip. Her narrative was shattered by raw financial reality. But I wasn't done. This wasn't just about money. It was about her behavior, her accusations, her secrets. "You sent me a letter," I continued, my voice gaining a quiet power that commanded the room, "demanding back rent, accusing me of not contributing, calling me a freeloader indirectly, repeatedly for 6 months. I pulled out another document. "While you were doing that," I said, sliding a bank statement across the table that showed recent outgoing transfers. I was doing this. This statement showed large recent payments to the power company, the gas company, the water company, all made out to Robert and Mary Turner's account numbers, followed by 2 significant wire transfers to a local roofing company and a foundation repair company. "You complained about me using your electricity." "Your water," I said, looking directly at Eleanor. "What you didn't know was that I discreetly took over paying all your major utility bills months ago. They've been paid on time in full every month from my account. I've been contributing, Eleanor, more than you charged in that ridiculous rent demand." Eleanor stared at the utility payments, then at the transfers to the construction companies. Her eyes widened further in horror. "And while you were worrying about freeloaders," I continued, my voice low and hard, bringing in twist 2. "I was aware of the real problems with this house. Walter mentioned the foundation and the roof. I had them inspected. I've already made arrangements and paid the deposits for those major repairs to be done. The contractors are scheduled to start next week. That's where some of my freeloader money has been going, Eleanor, to fix the house you were so worried about losing." Walter looked at me, shock and maybe a flicker of gratitude or confusion in his eyes. Then I turned my gaze slightly toward Ben, but addressed Eleanor again, bringing in twist 1. "You were so focused on my supposed lack of contribution on needing money," I said, my voice flat. "Perhaps you should have been more focused on the $8 million second mortgage you took out on this house 2 years ago to bail Ben out of his undisclosed troubles." Ben flinched violently. Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Walter snapped his head towards Eleanor, his face a mask of shock and betrayal. He clearly didn't know the full extent of that debt, or that it was tied to Ben. "Yes, Eleanor," I said, letting the full weight of my knowledge descend upon her. "I know about the second mortgage. I know about the transfer to Ben. I know about the financial hole you are really in. Your desperation wasn't because I was a burden. It was because your own choices and Ben's put you on the brink, and my perceived lack of income was an obstacle to accessing a potential bailout, or at least meant I wasn't offsetting the burden Ben created. The emotional catharsis was overwhelming, not with shouting, but with the quiet, undeniable force of revealed truth and financial reality." I looked at Eleanor, her face a mask of utter humiliation and defeat. "You called me a freeloader?" I said, my voice steel. "You belittled me. You disrespected me. You tried to kick me out of the house I was helping to save, a house that is on the verge of collapse because of your own hidden debts and bad decisions. You built a narrative of my laziness to cover up your own financial irresponsibility and favoritism towards Ben." I stood up from the table. "I kept my income quiet because Chloe asked me to avoid drama," I stated clearly. "But all it did was allow you to create this false, cruel drama based on your own insecurities and secrets. I tolerated it for 6 months for Chloe, and because I wanted to see how far you would go. Now I know. You would go so far as to get a lawyer and try to legally demand money from the person who was quietly paying your bills and planning to fix the roof over your head." I looked at Chloe, offering a small apologetic smile. "I'm sorry you were in the middle, Chloe. But it had to come out." I turned back to Eleanor, Walter, and Ben. "I will ensure the utility bills are paid until you can manage them yourselves, which, given your financial state, might be a while. The contractors I hired will complete the foundation and roof repairs, as I have already paid them. Consider that my back payment for the past 6 months, and then some." My voice hardened again. "But Chloe and I will be moving out tomorrow, immediately. I will not live in a home where I am disrespected, accused of being a burden, and where my wife's family operates on a foundation of lies and secret debts. You wanted me out. You got it." I looked at Eleanor, her face contorted in a silent scream of defeat. You thought I was a freeloader you could control or expel. I said, my voice final. You had no idea. I wasn't freeloading. I was silently holding a safety net you didn't know you needed while you were busy kicking the person holding it. Your accusations didn't make me poorer. They just revealed how truly bankrupt your judgment and behavior are. I picked up my briefcase. Chloe, are you coming? Chloe, tears still streaming, nodded immediately and got up from the table, coming to stand beside me. The table was silent, food growing cold, the weight of the revealed truth crushing Eleanor's fabricated world. Walter looked lost. Ben looked terrified. Eleanor looked utterly defeated. Chloe and I moved out the very next day. We didn't say goodbye. We didn't pack everything, just essentials, leaving the rest for later. The silence from the house as we drove away was profound. The direct legal threat from Eleanor's lawyer disappeared immediately after I sent them a formal response outlining my income, my secret contributions, and the proof of the second mortgage and intended repairs, along with recordings of Eleanor's accusations. They knew they had no case, trying to force payments from someone who was secretly bankrolling them, and knew their hidden vulnerabilities was a non-starter. The foundation and roof repairs I paid for were completed over the next few months, securing the physical structure of the house. But the emotional structure of the family was shattered. Eleanor rarely spoke to Chloe after that, only short, tense calls that usually ended in arguments or tears. Her humiliation and resentment ran too deep. Walter occasionally reached out to Chloe, apologetic, admitting he hadn't known the full story of the second mortgage or Eleanor's behavior. Ben disappeared for a while, likely dealing with the consequences of whatever debt Eleanor had bailed him out of now that he knew I knew. My relationship with Eleanor is severed, completely. There was no apology, no attempt at reconciliation from her. The shame was too great, and the depth of her meanness was exposed. Walter and I have a distant, strained relationship. Chloe is relieved to be out of the middle, but heartbroken over the loss of her relationship with her mother and the damage to her family. We've rebuilt our lives stronger than ever now, living in a home we own with no secrets about our finances. The experience taught me the high cost of silence, even when intended to protect others. It taught me that some people are so invested in their own narratives and insecurities that they will actively harm those closest to them. It taught me that true contribution isn't always visible, and seeking external validation from toxic sources is a fruitless endeavor. Most importantly, it taught me the power of owning your truth and the devastating effect it can have on those who live by lies. I protected my dignity and exposed a painful reality. It was a victory, but one tinged with the sadness of what family sometimes becomes. Looking back, the question of whether I should have revealed the secret earlier, perhaps before the resentment festered so deeply, or handled the confrontation differently, sometimes crosses my mind. But knowing Eleanor, I doubt a calm conversation would have ever worked, considering the depth of Eleanor's behavior, the lies, the manipulation, and the legal threat she issued while I was secretly helping them. If you were me after that climactic Sunday dinner and moving out, would you consider any form of contact or support for Walter in the future, given he seemed less directly malicious than Eleanor, even if it meant navigating the complexities with Eleanor A? Maintain the complete cutoff from both Eleanor and Walter to fully escape the toxicity. B. Consider very limited cautious contact with Walter. Perhaps years later, if he genuinely tried to build a relationship separate from Eleanor's influence. What do you think I should do?